Hey, ladies and gents, welcome to the Controlled Interest Gamecast, episode 258. I am your host, Jerrad Wyche. As always, I am joined by co-host and marathon runner, Dominic Orlando.
Yeah, that's true. I'm one of those weird, insane people that for some reason decided to run 26 miles all at once for fun.
For the last couple of weeks of Twitter, you can put in your Twitter bio, marathon runner now. It's official. It counts.
That's true. I could put anything in my Twitter. I could pay $8 and apparently be anyone I want, guys.
Man, there was a thing today about somebody pretending to be insulin provider, and they tweeted like, "Oh, insulin is free now," and the stocks of that company dropped, like, cost them millions of dollars. So it's incredible. A shout out to Elon Musk providing a perfect example for everyone that just because you're rich and the head of a company doesn't mean that A, you know what you're doing, and two, you should be in that position in the first place.
Oh man.
Yeah. But it's cool, man, that not everybody can say they've ran a marathon or at least finished a marathon. We talked about before, like, you're a different breed. I hate running. I don't know if it's because I have flat feet or if just I'm a sane person unlike you, but man,
yeah, just a few more brain cells than me,
yeah. But congrats on that. Is awesome. How long was it officially? Like the total?
It was 3 hours and 44 minutes and a couple seconds.
And then in terms of like running distance, how long was it?
26.2 miles.
Jesus. Yeah. Man, the amount of times I dreaded going into school and having to run the timed mile for like school, and you're like, oh yeah, I ran 20 times that. I'm like, oh god.
Yeah,
different breed.
I remember that in like elementary school the first time running the mile. I did not like it then. It's no good.
Did you guys have the president's test in Michigan where you had to like do everything?
Yep.
Like you had to do a certain amount of pull-ups, a certain amount of this,
even like stretching, all that weird stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, I'm 13 years old. I'm like a bigger guy. There's no shot I'm doing a pull-up. Like, give me a break. What do you expect me to do? I knew dudes who were like in really good shape at that age. Boys, I shouldn't say dudes, boys. And they could barely do a pull-up. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, come on now.
Well, and there was no like adjustment for like each person. Like, yeah, like dudes way taller than me are going to have a higher jump. And the thing isn't measured based on your starting height or whatever. I don't know. Weird stuff like that. Pull-ups too. It's like there should be other variables that affect your score if we're really going to do this. Not like a standard. Anyway, it's not the military, I guess.
total tangent there. We're going to start with some sad news, unfortunately. Rest in peace, Kevin Conroy, a legendary voice actor and voice of Batman for millions of people. Kevin Conroy has passed away at the age of 66 following a bout with cancer. Interestingly enough, I think you and I both in a generation of people connected with him because of his portrayal of Batman in Batman the Animated Series. But I think the newer generation of people probably fell in love with him also for his performance of Batman, but through the Arkham games and a ton of other video games. He voiced Batman in the Injustice titles. Most recently, he played Batman in Multiverses. He's also done some other video game roles. He was a background actor in Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy, which is interesting and a little weird bit there. Yeah. There was a story that came out that I haven't had a chance to fully read, but I guess Kevin Conroy talked about how playing Batman helped him come in touch with his queer side, which I didn't know about. And it's something I want to look into. He was just always a stand-up guy. Anybody who's ever met him at a convention says that he's as great of a person as you'd expect him to be. And I think the greatest compliment any performer, whether that be voice acting, live action, whatever they do, or even artists of any medium, I think the greatest compliment they can have is when their performance is so tied to a character that people can't detach those two things from one another. And I don't know if you're this way, Dom, but for me, whenever I am reading a comic and Batman's talking, I hear it in Kevin Conroy's voice in my head. And that's pretty magical. I think that's something special that not a lot of people can pull off. And I think that's why he resonated so much with people, because he brought like a layered sense of like empathy and passion to the character. And it's hard for me to detach him from being my Batman. And I'm assuming you're very much the same way, right?
Yeah, definitely. Because I think most people our age, they grew up watching the animated series. And then, later on playing the Arkham games. Like, to me, Kevin Conroy is kind of like the baseline. That's Batman, right? Everyone else who does it, there's other people who've done it really well too, of course, but to me, it's always kind of being compared to him. Just same with the Joker for Mark Hamill. And like, that's the Joker laugh, like, is the Mark Hamill one. But for sure, Kevin Conroy is just, I don't know. To me, he's Batman. Like, that is like the definitive way he sounds. So, we can talk about like everyone else, like Christian Bale or Pattinson or whatever else, but like it's kind of like even the live action ones, I feel like they don't quite. I don't know. To me, Batman is Kevin Conroy, and that voice just kind of that's what it is. And yeah, this extreme. I was super upset to hear about this, because yeah, that's just tough, right?
It's a huge loss, and it is a bummer that we talked about this, I think, during the release of Gotham Knights, that it's like, when are we going to get the next Batman game? And this even hits harder in the fact that, like, by the time we do get that next game, it's not going to be him voicing him. And that's not to say somebody else can't come in and deliver a great performance as Batman.
Of course.
It's definitely not like a gatekeeping thing, but it's one of those things, like, if you have the option of Kevin Conroy, why do anybody else? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And to your point, I think, a lot of the live action portrayals of the character, I think honestly it's because they don't really go for the same type of thing Conroy does. And the thing with him in being an animated form, whether through video games or even in the films or Batman the Animated Series, is that it's so pulpy that he can capture the comic book nature of it. Whereas when you enter live action, it comes off a little bit more hokey. Like the closest thing that anybody's ever tried to do that with in live action is like the Adam West Batman, right? Which for some people, obviously they have a nostalgic connection. For a lot of people, it doesn't really age all that well. It's a little bit hokey and not all that it doesn't fit modern sensibilities, but it is a bummer. And I don't know, it just sucks when people pass away. I mean, it's kind of like, it sucks when people die. Unfortunately with him too, it was cancer. This isn't something where somebody lived a long life to their 80s or 90s and died of natural causes. This was something that was, mostly out of his control for the most part, because that's how cancer is. And it's just a bummer, man. Like, we've said it before and we'll say it again. Fuck cancer. Like, it just, it sucks. He was 66, and I don't know, some people might point to that and be like, he's pretty old. To me, 66 is like nothing, really. I think that I don't know, it sucks, man. I don't know what else to add.
It's just shitty. Even like in any scenario, like regardless, of how old or how long or not good of a life someone lived, it's never, even if you can point, like, say it's the most natural thing in the world, eventually everyone goes, of course, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt when we lose.
Yeah, and then
like
man,
that.
Cancer too is so fickle in the ways it attacks people, because there's cases of people who are lifelong smokers who are 80 who've never even had signs of lung cancer.
Yeah.
And there's people who are 28 years old, have never touched anything like that in their lives, get lung cancer. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense, unfortunately. So rest in peace to Kevin Conroy. I wonder if we'll eventually see, maybe he did have some projects in the work that we can see some more of him to some extent. Yeah, I don't know. It's a bummer. Yeah, it's probably, we often talk about celebrity deaths and do they touch you or not. And obviously to some extent it's a little weird because you don't have a straight personal connection with these people, but somebody like him who does so much in the entertainment medium, you're bound to connect to that person because they deliver these performances that connect to you in some way and kind of develop you as a person too from childhood. Kevin Conroy is pretty close to one of the most tragic losses in terms of somebody that's affected my life. The only one that I can think of for me personally that hit just as hard, if not harder, was Robin Williams.
Yes,
that one was really tough. I wasn't old enough to comprehend the loss of Chris Farley, but like it just whenever these people die who provide you with so much entertainment, it sucks, man.
It does.
Hopes and prayers out to his family, and I hope he had something in the works that we can see, that like the one last Kevin Conroy project, because if not, I'm gonna be revisiting those Arkham games just to get, honestly, yeah. I feel like I want to go back and rewatch the animated series again.
That's what I'm gonna do now for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Maybe one of these days we can do like our favorite episodes of the series as like a side topic. We can come in with our 10 favorite episodes or something. That'd be pretty cool. Maybe 5 favorite episodes. That. Yeah. Switching subjects. Turning the steering wheel to something a lot more exciting. Control 2 is officially official. Now, you may be saying, Jerrad, I thought we already knew this was in production. I'll get to that. So, Remedy Entertainment tweeted, quote, "We have signed an agreement with 505 Games to co-develop and co-publish Control 2, a sequel to Control. Quote, this is a very exciting moment for us," end quote, says Mikhail Kazurinin, game director of the Control franchise. This announcement comes a year after the studio announced a new follow-up project to Control that was in early stages of development. Remember, this came along with the announcement of Alan Wake 2, and then that other project. So it's exciting. This is officially official. 505 Games published the first title, Control. If you haven't played it, go check it out. I actually have been thinking about going back and replaying it to some extent because there was some side parts of that game that I didn't fully dive into that I think I should have, just because I was a bit more of in a rush to get to the end of that game. Unfortunately, but man, such a cool, distinct, unique world. I'm assuming, Dom, we'll get this after Alan Wake 2, right? It seems like Alan Wake 2 is the next thing, and then it'll be Control 2.
Yeah, because I want to say that they said Alan Wake 2 would be 2023. Might be wrong on that, but
I think they said holiday maybe, so who knows?
Okay.
But
yeah, it could end up getting
pushed
into 24 potentially, I guess. But so yeah, it seems like that's much farther along than Alan Wake or than Control 2. But man, I'm pumped. This is great news. Yeah, Control is I love that game. That kind of caught me by surprise. It probably shouldn't have. I just didn't pay enough attention to it before it came out. But when I finally got around to playing it, everything about it, I love that weird kind of. It's not necessarily a horror game, like a Dead Space or something like that, but it just has like the spookiest atmosphere and this uneasiness and this mystery around everything that goes on. That to me is like the most unique thing about it. But man, that gameplay was awesome too. Just floating around, zipping shit at people, just telekinesis, all that kind of stuff. The gunplay was awesome. Yeah, I adored that game. I can't wait for the sequel.
It's one of the best superhero games. Obviously it's not seen like that. It's not meant to be that genre, but it is a superhero game for better or worse, and it nails that. And Quantum Break, I think, was a very underrated game. The TV aspect of that game kind of weighed it down a lot, but when you get to the actual gameplay moment-to-moment stuff of Quantum Break, I thought it had a lot of fun stuff in there. And anybody who played that game and then played Control can see that this is like the best evolution of that. It took away all of those parts that didn't need to be there. It kind of amped up the weirdness. Anybody who's familiar with like David Lynch television shows or projects, it very much has that vibe, like you said, where it's not traditional horror. It's more like creep you out and make you a little bit off-put by the weirdness of it all. The villain of that game has a lot of Hannibal Lecter vibes to him in the best of ways. Yeah, I can't wait. And once again, thumbs up for female protagonists in games too. We don't really get any of those. Jesse Faden, awesome. So,
and she
looking forward to that.
A really interesting character in general. I don't know. I really liked her in that game.
Yeah, I think she's the closest we've gotten in a video game to. Is Scully the female from X-Files?
Couldn't tell you. Haven't
yeah,
watched that
but
show.
I wasn't somebody who grew up watching X-Files, but through pop culture, I've just kind of taken in what that series was and what that character meant to people. And forgive me if it's not Scully, if it's the other name. But just anecdotally, I've kind of seen people kind of relate those two characters. So yeah, to your point, she was awesome. Next up, I have a slate of stuff here, which is basically what we missed. We haven't recorded the last couple of weeks for various circumstances. So here's some news that we missed and I wanted to touch on for us, Tom. So we'll go through these. First up, Netflix announced they've partnered with Xbox Game Studios and Microsoft to develop a live-action Gears of War film and adult animated series. About damn time. This was maybe like a year and a half ago. We were talking about Paramount Plus possibly hopping in on this, which I'm kind of, as cool as the Sonic movies are, though I haven't gotten to the sequel yet, I'm kind of glad it's Netflix doing this and not them. The adult animated series, that's not like, it just means like probably violence and gore and stuff. It's not like of the sexual variety of adult animation.
I didn't even think of it that way, but I guess
some people have. I read it too. I was like, okay, it's gonna be violent. Some people are like, adult. What a weird way to. The cool thing is Dave Bautista. When this tweet came out of this happening, I, funny enough, made a quote tweet and said, Dave Bautista, you up, because everybody wants him to play Marcus Phoenix. And one thing I didn't see originally was that he actually tweeted this, and it was a video of him in the full Gears of War armor, and it basically he tagged Netflix and he said I couldn't make it any easier. So he's in.
Man.
He wants to be in.
Oh.
My dream casting, and this is I think another topic we can do on a future show, Dom, is casting the Gears of War movie.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I would love for him to play Marcus Phoenix. I think he has both the stature and he's an underrated actor. A lot of these wrestling or athlete type guys go into acting, and you kind of see, like, I love John Cena, but outside of Peacemaker, I think his acting has kind of been not that great. But people like John David Washington, who I think a lot of people forget he was once an NFL athlete, Denzel Washington's son, who was in Tenet and a lot of other projects. He was an NFL athlete, and obviously he's a tremendous actor now. Dave Bautista, out of all the wrestlers, I think has taken it seriously. Like, I haven't watched Blade Runner 2049. I heard he's amazing in that. I watched the prelude that came out before that movie, and he was excellent in it. Obviously, we have the Guardian stuff.
I just watched Blade Runner, 2 or 3 weeks ago for the first time.
Awesome.
I didn't know he was in it, but that's exactly what I was going to say. Was he was really good in that, and I actually kind of forgot who he was, and then I thought I recognized him, and then had to look it up. Like, oh yeah, that's Dave Bautista. That's the Guardians of the Galaxy guy, and yeah, he was great. I could totally see him in Gears and doing a great job. I hope this happens like that, and I think that can elevate the show to have someone. It feels very Henry Cavill with The Witcher, right? To someone who's a bigger name actor. I don't know how you could compare them talent wise, but at least they're known, and that could elevate this show.
Somebody who's passionate, right?
In front of the
it's already built in.
Yeah, so I can see that being cool.
And he was in Dune too. Wasn't a prominent character, but he was like one of the big baddies in Dune. He's a great actor. You still haven't seen Guardians, Dom. You need to see Guardians, man. I know you like those movies. Out of all the Marvel stuff, I think you did Guardians and Guardians 2. He plays a huge part in that. I want Jon Bernthal as Dom. That's who I want.
Oh, yeah. Good one.
Yeah, I think Jon Bernthal, even if he's not Dom, if he's a different character, Baird or somebody, I think Jon Bernthal, just his whole vibe fits the Gears universe. I hope he's in it. This movie can be a real, like, I'm not expecting this to be an Oscar-nominated movie. I want this to be a balls-to-the-wall action movie that's just awesome. And that's all I'm anticipating from it. I don't want it to be as bro-y and as, like, bad it's good as the Fast franchise. I just want it to be a really good action movie. So, hope it happens. Dave Bautista, if I was Netflix, I'd be on the phone with him right now trying to get that contract settled because... Yeah, he's a big name, so he adds the marketing to it. And B, I think so many people want him to be in it that him wanting to be in it, and then if he isn't, I think will be a shame. And it's not like Marvel where it's a franchise that's already established that it's going to cast people regardless of what the fan castings say. This is just a new Netflix project, and Netflix is very much hit or miss with its licensed stuff. It's kind of miss on the live action anime front. And I think to ingratiate people and alleviate worry, it would be a good move to bring him on as early as possible so people know he's attached to the project. In terms of the animated series, I haven't gotten to yet, but apparently the Cyberpunk anime is really dope. So if it's anywhere near that, I'll be excited.
I've watched the first, 5 episodes of that and kind of tapered off. It was really cool, and then I just sort of lost interest. But that Cyberpunk one is... I'll end up finishing it. I have to. They're short episodes because I really liked it. But just for some reason lost interest in the last episode. But I wanted to mention because I had it in my head the guy who I wanted else aside from Dave Bautista in the Gears of War live action project was Russell Crowe for some reason. I don't know how old he is anymore, but I don't think I've ever seen him in the movie Gladiator. I don't know if you're familiar, but
if I'm familiar with Gladiator, one of the best movies of all time, yeah.
Oh, is it? I didn't. Okay, see, that's what I didn't know how big it was. Okay.
Yeah, Gladiator's like revered critically. It's like, yeah.
Okay, I didn't. I had a sense that I watched it for the first time like a decade ago, so it was still kind of old then because it came out in I feel like the late '90s or something. But I don't know. That guy in that movie just like gives me goosebumps, and he's like so fucking angry all the time, and just I could just see him in this Gears of War movie.
He could play the old general from Gears 1. I forget his name.
Yeah,
Johnson or something? Yeah.
Something like that. I don't know. That's for some reason I just had this guy in my head of like he'd be good in here. But anyway.
Yeah, man, I hope it's good. Netflix is, like I said, they're hit or miss, and one of the things I'm excited about that is, the fan base is pretty trepidatious about is the live action Avatar: The Last Airbender series. But the thing that has me most intrigued is the casting, because unlike the M. Night Shyamalan movie, it's all the parts that are supposed to be indigenous people, like the Water Tribe, like Katara, even like Aang and all. They're all casting them to be the what they're supposed to, which I appreciate. Like, they're casting mostly Asian actors and actresses, and I think it has a chance to be really good. Like, in terms of narrative and writing, I don't know how well that's going to do, but the fact that they're taking the time to cast appropriately is more care than that has put into any live action, at least from the Dragon Ball or Avatar series, the films, more care put in there than we've seen. Next up, speaking about live action adaptations of video games, we have the premiere date for The Last of Us, Dom. Last of Us is hitting HBO January 15th, 2023, starting off the year right. I can't wait.
Yeah, like, I wish I could just go to sleep and wake up and it be that day so I could watch this show. I didn't think it was going to be that soon. I thought it was going to be maybe in the summer or something, but I'm so pumped. I'm glad it's so soon. And I feel like I think we must have talked about it before, but man, the level of marketing already that HBO is putting towards this, like, I feel like they're selling it as, like, one of their top shows, like, as much as they've marketed Game of Thrones or even House of the Dragon and that kind of stuff. Like, unfortunately, it looks like they canceled that Westworld show that had been going for a few seasons before it finished. But I don't know. I feel like HBO gets it and is taking it very seriously, and I'm just getting more and more excited by the day for the Last of Us show.
Well, I mean, the pattern that they're currently hitting for me is awesome, because it went from Hard Knocks, which I love, to House of the Dragon, to now they're doing Hard Knocks mid-season, which is a new thing, where they take a different team and they're with them mid-season. It's the Cardinals, and it's the first episode premiered this Wednesday, and boy, is it as dysfunctional as you'd imagine, and it's great. Wow. I love it. And then we're getting Last of Us in January. Like, obviously, we're not going to expect House of the Dragon until 2024 at the earliest, unfortunately. But if they can hit this cadence where we're getting, like, a Game of Thrones series in the fall, and then, like, Last of Us that following early year, every other year, that'd be dope. That'd be really cool. So, though I don't think Last of Us is going to go on as long as... I think House of the Dragon probably has, like, 5 to 7 seasons in it. Whereas Last of Us, I don't know if they're... I say like 2-3 seasons max.
Yeah.
Who knows?
That's what I would guess.
We just don't even know where they're starting at, and how they're going to tell the story, and how much of the first season is going to cover how much of the first game. But
especially with how the second game, the events of it obviously like overlap, not like overlap timeline wise, but they're obviously greatly impacted in the first game. And now that we know things that happened in the second game, like, does that impact how you tell the story of the first game in season 1? I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I have a preference, I guess, but I hope it doesn't. But
whether it's the end of season 1 or season 2, but when the Last of Us show gets to the end of The Last of Us, will they introduce Abby? Right? Exactly. Like, will we see Abby? Is the thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exciting there. Can't wait. Something that's not as exciting, unfortunately. PlayStation, via their own blog, announced PlayStation VR 2 launching February 22nd, 2023, with pre-order starting November 15th for $549.99 US. $550 more expensive than the console. Tough blow, Dom. For this supposedly being the general consumer's VR headset, what do you think this price does for it? And like, how do you feel in terms of what the level of success they can have at that price point? Is it dependent on the launch library? Is it dependent on where we are financially with inflation in the country? Like, what does $550 do for you, and for what do you think the general audience for the PSVR 2?
I mean, it keeps it niche like it's been, right? Like, VR hasn't, like, there's been like those weird little devices, and even like that weird cardboard thing you put your phone into and stuff like that. Oh, yeah. That is more accessible, but like in general, I don't think it's broke into like a wider market yet. It feels like it stayed very niche and very like tech fanatic kind of territory. And I feel like reading through again like the technology and all, like how cool this new headset actually is. Like the screens are OLED and like I think near 4K or like all that kind of stuff, and the different track, all the stuff that goes into it. It's like you could totally see why it costs as much as it does. I don't doubt that it cost them a lot to build these, and their parts are getting expensive and all that kind of stuff, right? But I think what that means is you just can't expect to sell it to, you're not going to sell tens of millions of these things. You're going to sell a couple million at best, right, over a few years, just like the first one. Because that's a lot. I mean, that's more than the console required to play it itself. So overall, you're looking at almost $1,100 or $1,100 more than that with tax and everything for the PS5 and the headset. And because of the way the controllers or the tracking works or whatever, it's not just straight up backwards compatible with the existing PSVR library. I'm sure like some of those games will get updated to work, but that's a huge bummer because that was already a smaller library. And so to not have even the existing stuff just makes it a really tough sell, in my opinion, to the common, even like the average PS5 owner. It's kind of like a tough, like, I don't know how you get someone to get into it, especially at launch. I'm sure that they're hoping that Horizon VR game is going to do the lifting there, but I just don't see that being enough. They're going to have other big software investments into it to make, to sell a lot of these. And I don't know. Maybe eventually when we get past the point where there's so many exclusive games on each VR platform, like, Half-Life Alyx is only on, Vive or whatever, and then there's
Steam Index.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just tricky. It just seems like maybe VR, a lot of us expected it to blow up, right? And eventually we'd get there to the point where like it's more common. Maybe not quite as common as game consoles themselves, but more than just an add-on, a peripheral. And this isn't it, right? We're not there yet. If we ever will be there, I don't know that we will. So.
Yeah, I think the worry for me is that I would have hoped that PlayStation would either try to break even or lose a little money on each sale of the PSVR 2 with the goal of flooding the market with the technology and then trying to make up that money on the back end with software, because they wholly believe in the actual I'm not saying they don't believe in it, but with this price point, it leads me to believe that they want to try to turn a profit, or at the very least break even, which to me worries me that they're not fully invested in keeping this as a long lasting like sector of PlayStation. And I could totally see the launch of PlayStation 6. Maybe aren't even worrying about a PSVR 3 because that's not where the market is headed. And they tried VR a while ago, and then it came back like 5 to 7 years ago. And yeah, to your point, I don't know if it's just too early to where we're just not at that point yet in society where people are vying for an experience in which they can get a VR headset and escape reality to that extent. And honestly, I wonder if maybe COVID hurt people to that extent too, because we were so closed in and forced to live in our homes and not be able to do anything, that we might be seeing an era in which people want to spend more time outdoors or spend more time doing things because we face the reality of not having those freedoms to some extent. And obviously, freedoms is a bit hyperbolic. I'm not saying people's freedoms were taken away. But, in order to make everyone safe, we did our own thing and made sure we were safe while protecting everyone else. And I wonder if we're flipping to this point in which, people aren't interested in buying VR. They'd rather spend that money to go hiking at a resort or go do these different things. And I do think we might be entering an era in which people are looking for experiences outside, like real person-to-person experiences, and maybe VR is kind of falling by the wayside because of that, unfortunately, because of what we had to endure with COVID.
And that's like the whole industry. Sales were up in 2020 and 2021, but I think, or maybe it was just 2021, like they started to go back down, basically, like as things started to open back up, people got out of their houses again they were buying less video games in general. And certainly you'd only multiply that for VR, right? Being it's more expensive and more immersive and so on. So like this moment is maybe not the best time to try to sell those when the industry is like on a slight downturn.
And then you add in economic
the whole
situations too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe that's a funny thing. Sorry, go ahead.
But like I don't know. We're kind of in this like thing of like this do or die, like blow up or bust, because it feels like that's how most technology is viewed, like because that's how like Google treats things or whatever. It's either it doesn't set the world on fire after a year, then we're canceling it. It was a failure. It was a waste of money, or just we tried it and it didn't work and that's okay. They accepted that risk. But I don't know if there is like that weird like sort of middle ground for them with this, where they're like, yeah, we're not necessarily trying to make money from it, but maybe just like recoup the investment to some extent, to some percentage, enough so that we can prolong it to keep it. Maybe it's going to take another decade before it like fully grows into something like meaningful, or it just stays the size it is and that's okay, and they just like it or something. I don't know. I just don't know exactly what they want out of it, because it feels like everyone's perception has been like, oh yeah, VR is going to blow up and it's going to be the biggest thing ever, and like that just hasn't happened. But who's the one saying that? Like you know what I mean? I don't know if maybe that's not what
Meta.
They're trying to do. Yeah, exactly.
The biggest tell to me is that Microsoft hasn't entered the VR marketplace in any meaningful way.
Good point.
And at all. And they're a company who they don't hop on trends, but if they see something that's viable, they tend to invest marketing and research into that, and R&D, research and development. And the fact that they haven't even come close to touching that is interesting to me. It's the same thing about them not really touching portable like handheld consoles at all.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't really touched that either, and we've seen PlayStation kind of escape that whole venture with the Vita and the PSP. So I don't know. We'll see. It's a weird place. VR is something that I definitely think that at a point in my life I'll dive deep into and get fully invested in. But at this point, I just don't see the return on investment, not only from a price standpoint, but from, I don't know. It's in a weird place, man. I don't know. We have people trying to launch a whole metaverse and we can't even get VR off the ground. Like, I don't know what's going on. We'll see. I think the people who are the PlayStation diehards will fully invest in this, but in terms of the general audience, people are struggling enough to get their hands on the console, so I don't know if those type of people are going to be springing out to get something that has even less software for it that's more expensive. Mm-hmm. Like, you're going to be spending, over $1,000, probably like $1,200 after taxes for the console and PSVR 2, when you can get a PC and a which one's the wireless one? Is it the Quest?
It's 2? Yeah, it's the Facebook one, the Meta one.
Yeah, which thankfully they got rid of that whole thing where you had to like enter in your Facebook account. Luckily, we'll see what happens. I just thought that price point was kind of crazy. We talked about, will it be cheaper? Will it be more expensive? And they're like, nah, it's $550. Deal with it.
And then like the last thing about it, I guess, is I feel like maybe a lot of that's a moot point anyway, because they're gonna sell out, because they're not gonna make that many, and they're probably gonna be hard to find. So
but will it be artificial scarcity, right? That's
just for lack of them, like, oh, we sold out you can't find a PS5 anywhere, but they've sold 10 million. Whereas this would be like, we can't find a PSVR 2 anywhere, but like they've only sold 500,000. So it's like they just didn't make that much because they're expensive to make. Anyway, so I feel like maybe they'll lean into that and like allow that scarcity to just kind of try to make it feel valuable. I don't know. When really it's just they don't want to pay to make too many or something. I don't know.
My hope would be that maybe two companies come together to make one VR headset that, because of both of their technologies, maybe lowers the price a bit and adds in both libraries to make it more. Because that's the thing, like you said, all of them, there's so many different VR headsets and they all have exclusive games to where all of them kind of hurt because of that. Like, I'd love if PlayStation just partnered with Steam on the Steam Index and it was maybe they stopped making their own PSVR headset and the Steam Index was just compatible with PlayStation consoles or something like that.
I can't remember who was talking about it, but maybe it was like Gary Whitta or someone on Kind of Funny. did mention that a lot of the new features on this PSVR 2 were already done by either the Steam Index or
the
one of the other
Vive
ones.
Yeah.
That like they were like kind of like those are the features that the other units are doing or plan on doing already. So like the more that the technology itself can become similar, I feel like should help. Not an entire partnership, but at least the games will be easier to get onto each platform, right? When the controllers and the tracking and all that technology is working similarly, kind of like how Xbox is so similar to PC that it's like easier to put games on both. That's kind of
the one worry with that is PlayStation is the most closed off,
right,
to partnering with other people. Like if Microsoft had a headset in the situation, I'd be much more optimistic that they would form a partnership with somebody because they've shown the willingness to do that. Whereas with PlayStation, they tend to be so closed off, sometimes to their detriment, sometimes to their benefit. That's what kind of worries me with them. I'm just hoping they're maybe a little bit more open to that idea. Speaking of open partnerships, remember when we talked about EA and Marvel partnering for 3 games, Dom? Well, according to Jeff Grubb of Giant Bomb, here's how the developer video game split up is happening. Motive is working on Iron Man, which we kind of already knew that. But the new Washington State studio, do you remember this was reported last year in October? We talked about EA opening a mysterious new studio in Seattle, Washington, working on an unannounced project.
Okay, yeah, it sounds familiar.
They're the studio working on Black Panther.
Okay.
And no studio is determined for the 3rd game yet. So out of 3 games, we know Motive's working on Iron Man, the new Washington State studio is working on Black Panther, which, I mean, if that ends up being their initial game and it ends up being as dope as it sounds, the open world Black Panther game, that'll be really cool for them. Which is funny that EA went from single player games aren't worth our time or investment to we're opening up a new studio and their first project is a single player Black Panther game. What a turnaround. Shout out to Respawn and Star Wars Fallen Order. You'll never get the credit you deserve for honestly maybe being the single turning point for EA's business strategy, which is kind of crazy to think about. Shout out to them. Vincent Palla, you're goated with the sauce, as the kids would say. Next up, we're not going to talk about this too much, but I wanted to touch on it. Required reading for this week. The link for this will be in the description on YouTube. Mick Gordon versus Marty Stratton in idSoftware. Award-winning composer Mick Gordon tweeted the following on November 9th, 2022. Quote, Marty Stratton, idSoftware studio director, lied about Doom Eternal's OST events in a Reddit post that used disinformation to blame me entirely for its failure. Later, he offered me a 6-figure sum to never speak about it. The truth is more important. He then linked to a lengthy and in-depth post on his own Medium blog discussing his full statement regarding the situation that occurred with idSoftware during the development of Doom Eternal. It's a must-read, and like I said, is linked in the YouTube description. Fascinating. It's disappointing from the perspective of Marty Stratton and idSoftware, the way they handled the whole situation. I feel bad for Mick Gordon. I have yet to play Doom Eternal, but I remember when that game came out, I own it and I still haven't played it, which is just video game. Just, they have the just girly things, just video gamer things. A lot of people talked about how the soundtrack in Doom Eternal, if you took that and you put in Audacity or another audio editing program, and you took the soundtrack from the original Doom, well, not the original, the reboot, 2018 or 2016, and you put them side by side, the technical detail in the Doom soundtrack versus the Doom Eternal one was not even close. It was like night and day. And there's a lot of in-depth stuff here about falsely accusing Mick Gordon, kind of ruining his professional credibility to a large extent. Not great stuff. I mean, when you hear about somebody offering a 6-figure settlement to not speak about it again, essentially a 6-figure NDA, that kind of shows who's guilty, honestly, in that scenario. It's a bummer.
If you're going to do that and offer someone that, you got to really make sure they accept it. Otherwise you look like an asshole.
Especially somebody who's so closely associated to what people loved about a game. Like, obviously the gameplay of Doom was its strength, but what often followed that, it's like the gameplay is just super fulfilling and engaging and it feels good just to shoot shit, but the soundtrack, right? That's all you'd hear from people is the soundtrack, the way the game felt with the music blaring. Mick Gordon is as much Doom as idSoftware is, in my opinion, and that's what makes this whole thing disheartening. So don't want to get into it too in depth. Did you have a chance to check this out at all, Dom?
I didn't read like his entire thing, but I think I read like just a tweet of this kind of a summary of it. That he definitely feels like he got a little fleeced, as I think I've heard some kids say on that deal. It's a huge bummer because music is awesome. And the game is like Eternal. I just played a few months ago, and it was excellent as I expected it to be. But yeah, it's a bummer because now, obviously, you hope he gets what he's owed and all that kind of stuff. But also, like, yeah, I'm not really expecting another Doom game with Mick Gordon on the soundtrack in my lifetime. That's a bummer.
Yeah, that's not to say they can't find another talented composer, but it's not like Mick Gordon is replaceable. You know what I mean? The same way. The other story I didn't want us to talk about because it's very complicated and muddy and it's a lot of he said, she said, is the entire thing surrounding Disco Elysium, where there's...
I thought you were going to say Bayonetta.
Yeah, there's that whole thing. Jesus Christ, yeah, that too. that one was a she said, they said, she said something real wrong. But Disco Elysium, the people who left the company are claiming that the people who are now in charge kind of did it maliciously. The people who are now in charge of the studio are saying that those people were let go because of misconduct. It's like just firing shots back and forth at each other. So when we get a more definitive answer as to what exactly is going on there, I definitely want to cover it because, Disco Elysium is considered one of the best narratively written games in a long time. And the fact that those people that made that game are no longer going to be a part of the studio who made that game is very fascinating. I just want to see more detail on what exactly is going on instead of, they said this, and we don't actually know what the truth is. Because to your point with Bayonetta, if we would have talked about that story right after the initial voice actor made their announcement, it would have painted Nintendo and the developers in a bad light. Whereas when all the information came out, it turns out maybe everything wasn't as it seemed, So just want to wait for more information there.
Yeah.
That's it for the news. Anybody still listening, I just want to say that we're going to be talking about, Dom and I both played about the first 2 hours of God of War Ragnarok. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about, I guess you could consider them spoilers because they're in the game, but we're in the first 2 hours of supposedly a 30 to 50 hour game. So take that as you will if you consider them spoilers or not. But I just want to talk about our experiences with the game from the top, and we can talk about the story moments and all of that. For people to know exactly where about the 2 hour cutoff is, it's when you go to Brock and Sindri's house after departing from Kratos and Atreus' home. So if you've played up into that point, you kind of know what we're talking about. Their home in the realm between realms. So, initial thoughts, we can go with both of us, Tom. First off, the game looks gorgeous. No surprise. I loved that they had the God of War recap. Not that I necessarily needed one, but I thought the way it was done was really nice. It all played into the opening scene where like it cuts to the right of Kratos and you see like a storyboard kind of memory. And then when you start the game, it just like removes the menu and he's right there where he was at the campfire.
I love that.
Very clean entrance. What I will say is obviously PlayStation makes incredible games, but one thing I think that they've absolutely nailed better than a lot of other games is the opening sequence of games where it's a natural transition. Also, I think the opening when you start the game and that PlayStation Studios comes on, it feels like for me, somebody who loves the Marvel movies, and you go and sit in a theater and the Marvel Studios logo comes up and you get the little intro thing. It's just so good, and you're in for a quality experience. So I absolutely enjoyed that.
With that branding of it and reinforcing what that means and how it makes you feel about what you're about to experience.
Exactly. Shout out to it launching with the accessibility option menu. I think every game needs to do that. One thing I found out too that I'm going to immediately implement in my playthrough is that in the menus, there's a puzzle option to make it extended plus. And the reason you'd want to do that is because some people have complained that when you're solving a puzzle in the game, if you don't do it in a certain amount of time, your companion character will just like yell out the solution. So I kind of don't want that to happen. So I'm going to go into the menu and switch that. It's just an option that says puzzle and you switch it to extended plus.
No, that's what that was. That's cool.
Yeah. We can get into more of the actual story and gameplay and all that stuff, but in terms of the intro for you, what did you think? And I saw you perk up when I said something about the recap.
Yeah, so that's always helpful in a game that's incredibly story driven, and And one of the things I did want to say about it so far after 2 hours is it's very much a sequel, very much a direct continuation of exactly where the first game, not literally the day after, because a few years have gone on, or have since passed, but you're in the same home in that Kratos and Atreus were at in the first game, in the same area in Midgard, and it's just a direct continuation in a lot of ways. So that, especially with that in mind, having that recap as soon as you boot this one up of like what's everything that happened in the first game, super nice to have that. Really nice the way it was edited together. And then also because in this game shit goes down almost immediately, and if you didn't remember the events of the first game, you might it wouldn't make as much sense. So it's really nice when they do something like that, like have that recap.
So the first surprise of the game, does the bear thing happen before the Thor Odin thing or after? Before, right?
Before, yeah.
Yeah. Did you see that coming? That Atreus was actually the bear?
That I knew that. I figured the bear had some significance. But then, yeah, that really caught me off guard. And that moment when Kratos realizes that it was Atreus, and it just like my heart sank, right, to see him react, because normally he's get over here, doing his Kratos, barely talking, no emotion really shown, and to see like that I could feel like what he was feeling like there, like, oh crap, did I just like kill Atreus? Like, you know what I mean? The way he reacted and crawled over to his son was just like, whoa. It was like so out of character, but entirely believable and everything. And then, yeah, I had no idea what was going on with that. I don't know why he was a bear or what happened there, but it was really cool.
I've dabbled a little bit with Norse mythology, so I know some stuff. And with Loki, obviously he's a trickster god, and he can basically not transform, but create illusions in which he's something he's not. So I didn't know that he was the bear. What I thought, because they were playing so much on the wolf imagery in the game, you have the two wolves there, you have Fenrir, obviously, who's taken care of. I thought that he turned into a wolf and was chased by the bear. So I thought there was some shenanigans with him, and maybe the blood was not only the bear attacking people, it was him attacking people or something. But I didn't see him being the bear coming at all. It's cool that they're playing with what is known about Norse mythology, but giving their own unique take on it. So you can know some stuff, but they can still catch you by surprise. I do like that they aged him up. We knew this going into the game. This is something we didn't know, but just seeing it in play, I like that they didn't keep him close to the same age. I think having him be a teenager now and dealing with a boy entering manhood, I think has a lot of parallels to Kratos' journey into becoming a better man. And I think that works really well. What I'm assuming is that the post credits for God of War 2018, when we see Thor at the door, I'm assuming that's meant to be the same scene we see in this. It's just that they just obviously there's a time skip and stuff, but they did it pretty well for what it had to be. And what I will say is the conversation between him and Thor, and then when Odin comes in, is one of the best displays of tension building in a game I've ever endured. Man. I think for it happening that early in the game, I think the writing was done so well. Ryan Hurst is phenomenal as Thor. I want him to be Sabretooth in the MCU so bad. I think he's such a good actor, and I've loved him ever since Remember the Titans, and he is killing it as Thor. I think the dude from West Wing, it's such a unique take on Odin, and it works so well because in this world, because I'll draw a parallel here. So in Marvel, the reason Thor and Odin work so well is because maybe not the first Thor, but after the second Thor, when they turn him into a more comedic, playful character, it bounces off well of somebody like Anthony Hopkins, who's a very serious, dour Odin, right? He's who you expect Odin to be, this big, fierce man who's quiet and speaks few words, but you listen. But Thor works with that because they turn him into a comedic character that doesn't really know what he's doing. He's a very handsome, good-looking man, but he doesn't know what the hell he's doing. He's kind of an idiot, right? He's a himbo, as they'd call him. In this, it works so well because Thor is played as this quiet asshole who is more powerful than almost anybody he comes across. and he doesn't act out of violence because he respects other people. It seems to me like, and this is very early in the story, he doesn't act out of violence because he sees no need, because he's never in fear of anything happening. He's just like, I can attack you and do what I want with you whenever I please, so I don't even need to worry about you. But Odin in this game so far is, size-wise, he's smaller than you'd expect.
Yeah.
He's not a very monotone, serious, deep-voiced, dour guy. He's more of like a sly mobster type character, which I kind of enjoy. And it kind of fits into the fact that he's more, with his ravens and everything, he's not somebody who imposes people with power, though I don't doubt he has that. He's more about information than he is about power. And I think he understands that the information he has is more important to him than the strength he carries.
When we find out that, obviously Thor and Kratos start fighting, and then, while that was going on, I was in my head like, oh, dude, Atreus and Odin are just back at the house doing Lord knows what, right? And then you come to find out like, oh, he just, he invited me to Asgard and, gave me some money and then left. And I'm thinking like, he's up to something. There's like some mischievous bullshit Odin. Oh, I love it. I can't wait to figure out what exactly, what kind of strings he's pulling with Atreus on all that. That was like really cool.
But that's more interesting and terrifying than if he was the prototypical, he kidnapped Atreus or he hurt him or something. It's like, no, this clever bastard is up to something. Before we talk about the Thor fight specifically, because that was awesome, I wanted to talk about the fact that 2 hours into the game, we've already had 3 like boss fights. We had the bear, we had the centaur, which I don't remember the exact name of the centaur boss.
The huntress, something.
Huntress, and then we had Thor, right? I think there was only 3. Awesome. I like that. I like the pacing of that, where you have the mob type fights where it's multiple mob characters to get you reassociated or associated with the gameplay and the combat. But I like that we're facing these little bit more difficult bosses, and they seem to be more often than even in the original one, which I'm excited about because I like that challenge. I like facing tougher foes. If there's anything you want to add about that, and then you can get directly into, since I started with the whole conversation, you can tell me your initial thoughts on the Thor fight in general and how that kicks off.
Yeah, so his intro or whatever, where it is that scene from the post credits of the first game, where he's just standing, 20 feet out from their front door, and as he walks up, like we've been used to like seeing, Kratos is huge in like every way. This guy's an absolute beast. But then as Thor, walks through that door, and the camera goes like over Thor's shoulder, and you can kind of feel like Thor is a solid like 4 or 5 feet taller than Kratos, and even bigger. This is an enormous monster of a man, and like it was just like the weirdest feeling of having Kratos feel small right there, and it was so intimidating. But then he just comes in and sits down, and all that tension building. But I really liked like during the fight, like all the shouting from Thor to Kratos, like, show me who you really are. Like, oh man, Ryan Hurst was just, I just like felt all of it. I was like, that's really working. Like, because he's just trying to goad him into like, being the god killer he was from the previous games and all that kind of stuff, and he uses blades of chaos and all that, and it was just the whole fight, that's to me, like the fight itself is actually like, it was, the combat's good so far, it's not bad, but you don't even have many variations of moves or anything at this point either, so it's pretty it's kind of basic still, but all that back and forth of them shouting at each other and the tension that led up to it, and really like the scene where that first like swing of the hammer that just sends Kratos just through the ceiling and 2 miles into the sky, like came so abruptly, even though like we knew they were gonna have to fight, right? But then the way it happened was just like, oh, holy crap! And then you just land in this arena, and like, I don't know, everything around it, the actual fight itself was just so good.
It was so epic. It felt like a blockbuster moment, and to your point, I think going into this, my biggest worry, not that the game wasn't going to be good, but I was worried how much it was going to feel like 2018's God of War. And to your point, it does feel like a straight up sequel, but I think in order for it to capture the magic of the audience and kind of take it to a next level, it needed to hit those narrative moments. And I think so far through 2 hours, it has, because I think that's what's going to lift it to be something better than its previous entry. And it is the subtle, small moments. Like, my favorite moment so far from the first 2 hours isn't the fight with Thor, as epic and awesome as it was. It's the conversation at that dinner table. I thought it was so well done. Like I said, the tension was incredible. And I loved that the fight didn't take place in one arena. It eventually evolved. There was cutscenes in between, and it felt very fluid. It didn't ever feel like you were being taken out of it by the action that was occurring. And God of War does a really good job of faking you out when you think you failed for being like bad at video games. You're just like, oh damn, I should have been better. Like the part where you die and then he's like, I'm not done with you yet.
Yeah.
Oh, so because it even has the loading screen with the tips. Yeah. So good. And that's the stuff that, like, you have to have somebody pretty brilliant on staff who thinks about those things, because that isn't an obvious decision to make. Because you could easily be like, okay, fade to black, have them come back to life as he's saying the dialogue. But somebody's like, no, what if we just literally make it look like the loading screen? Like, if there's the tips on screen, somebody might be like, well, then it kind of does feel like a fake out, and will they feel bad about that, and what's going to happen? It's like, no, but that's part of the immersion of, like, because it's a video game, you know you're controlling a video game, though you want to get immersed in it, but something like that doesn't break you from the immersion, even though it should, right? Because you're like, oh, I'm seeing tips for a video game I'm playing, and this guy's talking about me not being dead yet, but it works. I don't know, just because it's a video game, it's just awesome. And I love the point in which Thor never felt as if he was there to kill Kratos. He even says, like, it's a blood debt. All he wanted to see, and this shows just the type of character Thor is, and Ryan Hurst is playing him tremendously. He just wanted to see if he could break him to get to the point in which he was the uncontrollable killer that everyone in Asgard knows he is. And the moment Thor saw him break, he's like, oh, okay, I'm good. You know what I mean? We're even.
Yeah.
And that's super manipulative, and I honestly, that pisses off Kratos more than anything. I think he'd much rather have somebody trying to kill him than somebody playing with him in that way. And that's what it felt like for Thor, is he was playing with his prey.
And, like, there is a moment when, like, because he's so mad because Kratos killed his kids or whatever. And then Kratos basically calls him out on that and is like, dude, your kids hated you. Like, or I can't remember exactly what he says. He's like, they wanted you dead too or something. And then Thor's like, yeah, whatever. Just immediately, like, just admits that, like, yeah, you're right. I don't really give a shit, but I don't really care to get fatherly advice from you, Kratos, or whatever. And it's just like, something about the way that went, because you're like, part of what's driving Kratos to not lose control like that is what he doesn't, that's what he's trying to teach Atreus, right? Is like, you can't just go killing gods willy-nilly and doing things. Everything has consequences and it's serious. And we can't just go doing crazy stuff. Like, all that just worked so well. But I do still, like, we're really early. I'm expecting, and I don't think this is an unfair expectation based on how good the last game was, but the gameplay is entire. It feels it's the same as the last game so far, right? The combat, I have the same skill trees. I mean, some of the specific abilities might be different or whatever, but it's so fundamentally the same. Same two weapons, right? It has to do something that's like a third weapon, or that's
Mjolnir,
a big
right?
Change. That's kind of like the assumption, right? Like, we're gonna take that hammer, right? But something that fundamentally changes the gameplay, because otherwise it's like, it's just a sequel that's an extent. It's more like a DLC, not in scope, but in, like, gameplay, and that's the one thing that I'm curious to see what they have in store at some point. Because even in the first game in 2018, you don't even get the Blades of Chaos until, like, the last third or fourth of the game, right? So I'm wondering, like, if that moment, what it will be, or how that's going to work. Because right now the combat, it's exactly the same. In fact, it's slightly more basic because we're so early on. But I'm curious how that evolves. Because right now, to me, that is what would keep it at, like, a 9 out of 10 instead of a 10. Is that, like, yeah, but it's the same combat, the same exact. Like, the enemies are the same generic things. So, like, what's going to be the thing that propels it? That's what again, we're early. I'm sure it'll happen, but we'll see.
Well, and thematically, the thing I'm most interested in is the first game. A lot of that to me was, so Freya Freya was overbearing to some extent with Balder, which led to a lot of his issues. And even upon his death, she failed to take accountability for who he was and instead levied all that anger at Kratos, right? And obviously there's parallels there between the parenting aspects of her and Kratos.
Yeah.
And in this game, I wonder if the exploration is going to be, you hear Mimir talking to Kratos about, like, meet him in the middle, be there for him, or else you're going to lose him entirely.
Yep. Let him walk.
And his main antagonist right now is somebody who didn't care at all for his kids in Thor.
Yep.
And exactly. I wonder how that's going to play out and what the parallels there are going to end up being by the time this story unfolds. And yeah, I love that too, that they're paralleling the parental aspect of Kratos and how that affects not only him but Atreus as well. Because we went from an over-nurturing parent who failed to take blame for her actions to somebody who isn't even not taking blame. He just doesn't give a damn about anything or anyone. And yeah, I want to see how Kratos sees himself in his worst times through those characters. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah. It's like, there's just so much that happened in those first couple hours. I didn't expect it all to be like quite so like boom, like let's we're in it, let's go. But
I think it needed it because of how similar it is gameplay wise. It needed something to capture and be like, get ready for something more than that, or else, like, to your point, it would have felt like, am I just playing the sequel? I mean, am I just playing DLC and not the sequel?
The next level or whatever.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten to, like, the new areas and the new enemy types and all of that stuff, which is cool.
That's what else. I hope that so far, actually, like you mentioned, there's 3 different bosses that are pretty different, and so hopefully they continue with a wider variety of enemy and bosses throughout. But I was really happy to get back to Brock and Sindri, who, like, somehow in the midst of all of that other stuff we just talked about, these two are just, like, making me laugh in their little house because you're tracking mud in and stuff, and I don't know, they're great.
Dude, I would watch if there was a 10 episode order of, like, 2-minute shorts of Brock and Sindri at their stations with random characters coming in and dealing with them. God, it'd be so good.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes God of War special, these 2 new games, is that the original games, sure, they had side characters who were kind of interesting to some extent, but the main character and main focus was Kratos, and even then he wasn't that great of a character at that time. But with these 2 new entries, Kratos, obviously his journey and everything is captivating, but they've introduced a host of side characters. Like, I love Ymir, I love Brock and Sindri. Like, to your point, like, even in the last game, Balder and Freya were super interesting. Now we have Thor and Odin who are captivating. And the thing I'm most excited about with the video game medium in general is that Ryan Hurst is an actor who hasn't had a whole lot of star power given to him. I mean, he was in Remember the Titans, he was in Sons of Anarchy, and he was in Walking Dead. Sons of Anarchy was popular, but I think it was more of a niche popular than super popular. And then by the time he came to Walking Dead, it was already past its zeitgeist. And with this,
he was, I had to say it, criminally underused in The Walking Dead, by the way. I hate, like, I wanted more for him on that, because his character, like, basically didn't even get to talk. That was kind of the nature of the character, and didn't get to see his face or do much of anything, except be a brute. So that was a bummer.
Like I said, I'm campaigning. I want him as Sabretooth in the MCU.
The Gears Award movie. Yeah. I'll campaign for that one too.
Exactly. I just think he's such a good actor, and I'm glad actors are willing to come into the video game medium because they see the potential of the performances they can put in. I mean, the actor, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but the actor from West Wing, which everyone recognizes his voice, the fact that he's doing a video game is pretty impressive too, as somebody who's never done any before, which is awesome. And yeah, now we have video games going to live action and actors that are popular, like Pedro Pascal doing Joel and stuff. It's so dope. I'm excited to see where God of War Ragnarok goes. I think the next time we'll talk about it this in depth, just to avoid spoilers for people, will be our spoiler cast, which we're definitely going to do.
Because we won't be able to stay on exact pace like we did today.
Exactly. It's funny that we had we'll get 2 hours in, and that's pretty much it. But the one thing I will say is, because it is super mostly positive, I am worried a little bit about the armor systems and stuff. Of it might be a little too Assassin's Creed in the worst of ways. Of, like, I hope that doesn't become overbearing. Of, like, I'm getting all of these loot pickups. It hasn't been that, and I don't expect it to be that. It's just a worry I have. Other than that, I'm stoked about it, and it's interesting that I think what'll eventually be my 2 top games of the year, and probably yours too, are Elden Ring and God of War. And I think the difference there is that God of War might give me a narrative experience that I rarely have in video games, and Elden Ring gave me a gameplay experience I've never had in video games. And I'm going to see how those kind of weigh each other out.
It's going to be so hard. It's going to be like picking your favorite pet or kid or something.
Yeah, 1A and 1B kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the fact that we've got both of them in the same calendar year is super dope. You know what the crazy thing is, Dom? The day we're recording this is November 11th. We could be playing Starfield today, too.
Yeah. Oh, can you imagine?
That would have been wild.
I wouldn't even know, like, what do I probably would have been, like, burned through the God of War story, you know?
Exactly. And then get to Starfield.
Which would be tough to, I don't know. That'd be difficult.
Yeah, I'm glad we don't have to make that decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't wait to play more. Thank you guys for listening. If you can, please follow us on YouTube at Controlled Interest. Search that right up, will pop up. Subscribe, hit the bell notification so you never miss an upload. Like the video. Leave us a comment. Let us know how far you've gotten in God of War Ragnarok. And if you're not planning on playing it, are you looking forward to Starfield and diving in for hundreds of hours? Other than that, you can go on Twitter. You can follow us collectively at CTRLINT. It's Controlled Interest abbreviated. Individually, I'm at Jerrad Wyche, JERRADWYCHE. It's my name. And you can follow Dom at OBDomKenobi, but the O in OB is the number 0, not the letter O. Other than that, podcast services around the globe, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of that good stuff. We'll catch you guys next week with, you know what? I'm going to officially add it to the docket and tease it. Next week, we're casting the live-action Gears of War movie.
Oh, yes.
The way we're going to do it is I'm going to make a list of characters. I'm going to send you that. We're both going to individually cast them, and then we'll come back next week and talk about it as our topic of the show. Unless something crazy happens. But
let's even cast, directors or something.
Director and, yeah, I like that. Thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you guys next week with episode 230. Wait, not 230. 250. What episode are we on?
50 something.
259 next week. This will be 258. See you guys then.